Today, we're going to talk about a bit of a change with PSA's submission service when it comes to trading cards. It's an interesting one. There seems to be some misinformation out there, specifically from people who are sponsored by PSA, go figure. But I want to share my thoughts on this, talk about that misinformation, talk about what I think is happening here, and talk about why I think this is a good step in the right direction for this industry, for this hobby. Now, I've obviously been very critical of PSA in the past, but I just want to, share my thoughts on this one because I think it is a step in the right direction, but just bear with me as we do talk through it because it is a little bit tricky. Now, this is brought to you by the Sports Card Investor. This was the first place that I saw it, and as always, you guys know that I like to attribute. But what it has to deal with is the fact that PSA is eliminating the declared value requirement. Now, you guys might not recall if you haven't submitted with PSA yourself, but essentially the way PSA works is you have different value thresholds, which also have different, time frames for turnaround. They're mainly driven by how much your card is actually worth. And like you can sort of see here, there is a max, insured value at each of these thresholds, basically saying if you want to submit a $10,000 card, you sort of have to do it through this process. They don't let you basically submit it under this one. Now, what is interesting here is what sort of happened in the past was that, when you would submit a card under this value bulk, as an example, each card you would input into the system, you'd have to write in the specific value of that card. You might have a $10 card, you might have a $100 card, you'd write 10, you'd write 100, so on and so forth. Now, basically what is happening per, Nat Turner, and then also as reported by Sports Card Investor is, whatever threshold you're submitting under, that's what value your card is set at, what insured value your card is set at, because that's obviously, PSA's protection for you as a customer whilst the card is on hand at their offices, and then also for the insured value when they go ahead and mail it back. So again, if you're submitting under this service, every card is going to have a max insured value of $500 set. You don't have to manually set it yourself. Now, this is, interesting for a few reasons. When I first saw this, I thought it was, a good thing, straight off the bat, because it sort of reduces some of that time you have to waste as you're sort of submitting your cards. If you're submitting 10, 50, 100 cards, it's really annoying having to write the value for every single one of them, and you have to do the research and blah, 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 right? It's a complete, waste of time. Basically, what's happening now is it happens all automatically for you. And the reason why I say the old process was a bit of a waste of time is essentially because whatever you write there, PSA is going to check for themselves anyway. So you might have a $10,000 card that you say is a $10 card, and then as part of PSA's researching, when they take your card in to go ahead and grade it, they'll check the value. So if it doesn't align to what you said, they're going to go ahead and put it under the correct value, meaning they're going to upcharge you, right? So the fact that this process is now setting everything at the $500 floor, it sort of, removes all that wasted time we had to do in the past because it was completely redundant anyway. Seeing that then and thinking through this a little bit more, it got me a bit curious as to what this actually meant for collectors down the line. And if you read some of these posts that others have mentioned about this new service change, a lot of people have basically said, well, what does this actually mean for us? Because it means you're going to charge us more to insure our cards, and you're going to charge us more to ship home. And there's a bit more context there that I think is worth sharing. And that's sort of where the misinformation comes into things, because some people talked about, this being amazing and why it's really good. But there's a few clarifications here that need to be made. Number one, as has always been the case, whatever you set as the max insured value, PSA, as per the T's and C's, per their policy, is always going to take the lower of the actual declared value or the market value. So in this particular case, this payout is based on the degree of damage or loss. This is in case they damage or lose your card, and is limited to the lower of the item's fair market value or the maximum insured value for your selected service level. So what this basically means is if you've gone ahead and submitted under this threshold and it is $500 and your $10 card has now been flagged, automatically as a $500 card when it goes through the submission process, if they lose it or damage it, when they go ahead and do research and they see that it's actually a $10 card, they're going to pay you at $10, not $500. And that sounds like common sense, but what people sort of push back on here is, well, PSA, you're now saying everything that I give you is $500. Does that mean you're going to charge me more to ship it back to me? Because if that is the case, then we're sort of losing out here. We're losing out on all that no you just created by, no longer having us waste time by inputting the correct amounts. Because in this particular case, my $10 card is now going to be seen as $500 in your books, and now you're going to charge me more. And, I thought that was the case. And when I talk about misinformation, this was not a question that was asked by many others, but when I sort of played around with that theory, right, okay, is this new insurance threshold going to mean that we start paying more for return shipping? I couldn't really replicate it. Now, there's a few other questions there, but I'll get to that in a sec. Now, I sort of did this with 2 cards at the $2,500 price submission service. You can sort of see there that they're $500 each. There's 2 of them. It comes to $50 to grade and then $20 to ship. Now, what's interesting here is that I sent off a card maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago to PSA. It's been some time since I've sent to them. But I sent off something, like I said, 4 or 5 weeks ago, and it was 1 card valued at $500 under the same, submission level. And the return shipping came to $20 as well. So this being 2, now at $500 each, it didn't increase the cost of shipping. Now, I don't know if that's because the shipping is going to get recalculated once the value of the card is actually confirmed. But in this particular case, it doesn't appear to be more insurance paid on the shipping than what would have been there previously, given the 1 card I shipped or sent in a month ago is costing me the same as the 2 cards under the new threshold. Now, again, this could change once the grading is actually confirmed and the grades have confirmed. That wouldn't surprise me if that was the case, because that would give them a more accurate insurance level. But for the time being, it doesn't appear that, all these questions that people are asking about, well, now you're going to charge us more for shipping, doesn't appear to be super, correct. Now, obviously, you guys in the comments below, I will pin this if anyone does confirm this, if this amount does in fact change, because if that is the case, that's a really, shitty thing to put customers in the middle of, right? Because now what you're sort of saying is, well, you've made your own process much more efficient. You've saved us some time on the, submission level, but from your perspective, PSA, you're not going to pay us out on that amount. You're also going to go ahead and charge us more to ship it back home. You sort of can't have it both ways. And I understand, from a business standpoint, why they want to be taking that position, because it makes sense, right? You want to be making sure that from an insurance perspective, you're sort of looking after the inventory you have on hand. But if you're sort of insuring something for $500 and then it gets damaged and then you're going ahead and only paying out $10 on that, how does that work with your insurance company when it comes to making a claim? Does it make sense for you as a business to be paying an insurance premium on $500, right, when the card is only worth $10, right? There's a bit of a gap there. That's something that, I don't quite understand how it's going to actually work internally for them. But it's ultimately one of those things that I think is a step in the right direction for PSA and some companies within the trading card space, right? The regulars on the channel will know that I've talked about a lot of the inefficiencies that exist within the grading process, within the manufacturing process that really, shouldn't be there. And they ultimately end up meaning the customer has to pay more, right? Because the companies have to go ahead and recoup their money. And I think this is one of those, right? Because in the past, if you think about it, like I said earlier, you as a customer submitting is going to have to sit there and, submit 20 cards and then have to, figure out what the valuation is for those 20 cards you're submitting. And then PSA is going to have somebody that actually looks at them and then also goes ahead and looks at the value they can find publicly, right? Because they're going to have to go ahead and check that stuff anyway, because they want to go ahead and upcharge you. So the fact you've got somebody sitting there, number one, that has to look at what the customer did, compare it to what they did, then, make a determination, just seems like a complete waste of time. Like, completely remove the customer out of the equation because you're going ahead and doing the research yourself anyway. So the fact that you can sort of save some time there with an employee, and even if it's only a couple of minutes per submission, that's, over the million of cards they're getting a month, that's a lot of time that eventually adds up and creates some, long-term efficiencies, right? Efficiencies in perpetuity. So something like that, I think, is a step in the right direction, because it shows they're starting to think about these things. Now, ultimately, where the disappointment is going to come is that they sort of go ahead and do this, but then still shaft the customer down the line by, number one, not paying them out on the insurance, and then number two, charging them more for the return shipping, or ultimately implementing efficiencies like this and then not going ahead and passing those savings on to the consumer, because that ultimately sucks, right? And there are a lot of other inefficiencies when it comes to, grading companies making mistakes with how they go ahead and label things, how they go ahead and assess autographs, all that kind of stuff, right? There's things that I've mentioned in the past they could be doing better that I think they're not, and they're sort of, on a knife's edge to an extent, right? I think this is a step in the right direction. And obviously, I'm a bit lost for words right now. I'm pretty tired. I had a long day at work, so I'm not going to go into it. But if you guys want to hear me maybe put together a video talking about what I think the likes of a trading card company or a grader, I should say, or a manufacturer could be doing to make things more efficient, and where they're sort of leaving a lot of money on the table, I'm happy to try and do that and put it in, a clear and concise video for you guys, because my brain is absolutely cooked right now, so I do apologize. But, ultimately, I think this is, an interesting one from PSA that I think ultimately is a good thing. And I feel like I've said ultimately a lot, but again, my brain's cooked, so forgive me. So again, one of those ones where it's going to mean that you waste less time submitting things. And I'm just truly hoping that when the insurance costs are calculated for shipping, they're not actually doing what's alluded to in this video. And, You know, what was pretty disappointing, like I said, is a few content creators who were sponsored by PSA. I'm not going to name them because I'm sure you guys know who they are, but they've gone ahead and, you know, praised this thing from PSA, but have not talked about that insurance element. And I think that's an important one, like I said a few times now for this video, because if it works the way people are assuming it does, i.e. they're going to charge you more, but then not look after you when it comes to payouts, you know, that's a really shitty thing. So anyway, that's it for today. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you guys and girls in the next one. Cheers.